All right, welcome to the Step Up podcast. This is step 2 in our prosthetic design series. The name of this episode is Taking the First Steps, the Power of the Preparatory Prosthesis. My name is Scott Baranek. I'm a certified prosthetist. I'm with Nate Kapa, a certified prosthetist from Bremer Prosthetics.
And the real purpose of our episode today is we hope to do three things. First off, explain what a preparatory prosthesis is. Number 2, explain why it's a critical step after amputation that shouldn't be skipped. And then number 3, talk about how it helps with both physical recovery and emotional adjustment. So I guess I kind of like to start by just stating the definition of a preparatory prosthesis. So a lot of times we'll hear the term temporary prosthesis, right? And I mean, those terms kind of can be interchangeable. I don't really personally prefer the terms temporary or permanent or final because I think it puts the wrong connotation on a definitive prosthesis when no prosthesis is ever permanent or final. Every prosthesis is a change in body weight or activity level or anything away from needing to be replaced.
Right.
So, but I think the word temporary is a good way to think of the preparatory prosthesis in that it's designed for early use. Kind of right after your surgical site is healed enough to bear weight or tolerate pressure. And it's designed so that to be made fast for you, so we can end that cycle of limb atrophy, joint contracture, all those things. And you can start to begin the process of recovery through acclimation to daily use of a prosthesis and physical therapy.
Right.
And there are some other things. What are some other things that a preparatory prosthesis kind of is really, keyed for?
I mean, what's the big one? Starting physical therapy or getting up and walking again. I mean, this is the big thing we've been waiting for.
Right.
I mean, we talked earlier in the post-op series. It's like the hardest part is waiting that 8 weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks to get up and walk again. Now we can start the journey of getting our life back and what that's going to be like. Now it's going to be hard.
Right.
This is hard, but now we're doing something.
Right.
That every day of sitting around waiting where the days seem like weeks, that's over, and now we can start to get an idea of what this is going to feel like. So that's good, but then starts the, oh wow, now I didn't think it was going to be like this.
Right. And, it doesn't necessarily trigger an end of the emotional process of getting a prosthesis. It just kind of adds a physical process to it also. So now you kind of have two journeys you're on. But the other thing is it does kind of help to focus in on, okay, this is what this challenge is. It's no longer the unknown, right? Now it starts to become a defined quantity.
It becomes a real thing, and it gives us something to do. Now we're not passive in our journey. I always say, like, when you lose your limb, for me, it was like I felt like I lost control of my life, and it was things were spiraling. And now we've got something like you can take control, and you get a little bit of control, and this is where we start to get life back. So
I mean, we look at it like, we want to promote early mobility because that ends that cycle of atrophy. We want to boost confidence and motivation. I mean, taking steps, it's not an easy thing to do, but again, it's starting a process, and that, sometimes starting that journey is just so much less scary than waiting for the journey to start. So it's a time that you can, even though maybe that first time putting the test socket on for the preparatory prosthesis is like I don't know. I'm not sure if I can do this, if it's going to be like this. But as you're going through this process, it can start to build hope. Right? You can start to get hope, and you can start to learn how you can have independence again. You can start to get this process.
And I guess we do have to mention, like anything, everybody is different. There are those people that just stand up and they But for most people, it is a little, it can be a little intimidating.
And is it always the strongest, most active people that just put it on and go?
No,
not at all, is it? I mean, it really defies expectations, doesn't it?
I mean, some of the people that we've learned over the years that we don't put labels on people who we think are going to do the best. The people that you might not think are going to impress you the most will sometimes shock you.
Exactly. So, another thing that the preparatory prosthesis really is going to be designed to do is help create the proper shape of that residual limb, or to help mature it or season it, or however, whatever term you want to use, so that we can stabilize things.
Yes.
And so that your body can be stable with a prosthesis, so that when you get your definitive prosthesis, it's that much more likely to be lasting, to be something that works for you, not just on the day you get it, but to keep working over a period of time.
I mean, this is a funny, to try to reassure people that this is normal, but then explain that this is going to be one of the most frustrating parts of the process is that stabilization, because you're going to get, okay, we're walking again, and this is good. And when we talk, but then this is the part with the stabilization, the inconsistency is what's going to create the frustration, because one day you're going to feel good and we're walking again, and then the next day, because the limb is the volume inconsistency, then it hurts, and then it feels good one day and it doesn't feel good the next day, or maybe it feels good in the morning and it doesn't feel good in the evening. So this gets to be frustrating, and just reassuring these patients this is a normal part of this process, and this is temporary. This is not going to be this way all the time, and getting them to understand and trust that we mean this. We're not just telling you this, and that maybe a year from now this will be consistent, and this is something we have to go through.
And I think that brings up a really good point, is that, early on, while the double of the struggle, that early on, while you're trying to learn how to incorporate this prosthesis into your life, how you're trying to learn how to kind of accept the feelings on your body that it's putting, and all these things, your limb is also changing, getting swelling, and the swelling's going down. And now you've got these fitting socks that, okay, yesterday I had on 2 fitting socks, and by at the end of the day, and things were feeling great. And now this morning, when I put those same fitting socks on, nothing's working for me. It's just that idea that things
and understanding that just because I had 10 ply on when I took it off yesterday doesn't mean you do 10 ply in the morning. And then you're like, I'm trying to understand all these things and I'm overwhelmed, and the pin doesn't line up with the hole, and why, and it's a lot to take in.
And so, I mean, I think there is some value in having, this occur with a prosthesis that you kind of isn't your final design. You're going through this frustration with something that is only temporary, and that as some of these frustrations are going to self-correct, and you're going to overcome them, Some of the frustrations are going to be things that last and persist and are just kind of inherent in the way that preparatory prosthesis is designed. But with those frustrations that don't go away, you have the opportunity to communicate those with your caregiver, with your prosthetist, so that once your definitive prosthesis is designed, it's designed so that to help you overcome those specific frustrations, so it's a really big, it's like a long diagnostic process also.
And I think, any advice we could give to other professionals like therapists, being empathetic. These frustrations to these people, these are equally as much as learning how to walk. And some of the inconsistent, we talk about, it's overwhelming to them, and it can hold them back just as much as a sore in the leg from wanting to proceed with their prosthetic care early on. So just letting them know that these are real things and acknowledging that, but saying that, a simple analogy that I like to use with people, but I think sometimes they get it. When you were a kid, I remember to go to school, you had to learn how to tie your shoes. And now they've got this putting on the liner and managing the socks and all the other things, but learning to tie your shoes seems so overwhelming. But now you do it without even looking. It's just something you can do in your sleep. Well, believe it or not, lining that pin up with the liner is going to get to be that way too. And putting on your socks, because they think, how in the world can I put on my prosthesis if I wake up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom? You will, but it seems like a daunting task right now. So
we talked about this a little bit in our other episode, but when does somebody get a preparatory prosthesis?
Once their doctor clears them for weight bearing.
And what does that typically look like? I know we're not surgeons, so we don't get to make that decision, but what kind of things is the surgeon typically going to be looking for to give that clearance?
Staple removal or suture line.
Making sure that the incision site is well healed, often so that there's not even any scabbing, or especially any open areas or drainage,
We want that residual limb to be more conical in shape and not bulbous.
So
That's
like not bigger at the bottom than it is up at the knee.
now sometimes this isn't ideal, but sometimes we're fitting shrinkers and wearing liners and doing things that we just can't. We have to fit a
Right.
prosthesis to try to do
Right. Yeah.
shape
Sometimes the
management.
musculature just leaves that limb in that shape,
Yeah.
right? There's
Yeah.
sometimes that's just the shape that somebody has.
And then, yeah, and it doesn't make the shape of the socket initially ideal, or we have to do different
Right.
means like a P-light liner with
right.
some stovepipe buildups. But yeah, we like it to be more conical in
Right.
shape if we
Yeah.
can.
So, the idea is that, if once a surgeon gives the clearance, that's obviously a timeline that's going to be really different for everybody. And we can't really predict necessarily like how people heal up or when their surgeon is going to clear them. But let's say that person is in their office right now, in their surgeon's office, and they say, you're good to go. You're ready to start using your prosthesis. I'm going to send an order to your prosthetist for them to start. What would the timeline then look like? What would an ideal timeline look like?
For us to get them fit with the
Yeah.
preparatory prosthesis, I like to get that from that time frame. My goal is 10 to 14 days.
Yep. And I think that's pretty realistic. And I mean, obviously, with the mindset that I look at it like we're trying to do this as fast as possible at this time, right? Like this is the time in our prosthetic design process that we're, it's not to say we're less detail oriented. It's not to say that those things, but what the one known quantity that we have is that person's limb is not going to be stable.
Right.
That limb is going to look different day to day, week to week, and month to month. So we're not going to take that same level we're just not going to take the same amount of time to try to have that precision where this fits the same all the time, because we're chasing after a moving target.
Right.
At that point. So for me, that timing, the most critical component of that timing is, how do I get you started?
Right.
How do we start this process? How do I get you something that you can use for physical therapy and that you can start to put on in your home and start to use on a routine basis?
Right.
Right. And so we don't want to take, when we design a definitive prosthesis, we always say we're waiting for somebody to come back into the office and say, this is exactly how I want it to be. That wouldn't necessarily be the case with a preparatory prosthesis, right?
No. With the preparatory prosthesis, I'll have you in the office. Typically, I like to have that the test socket set up on a socket block, and if it fits good, and again, like you said, preparing them to stand up. Sometimes, if it fits good, and we'll say, okay, maybe go ahead and stand up. Well, they haven't had a lot of time to think about standing up, so this is sometimes good that they haven't had a chance to think about it, and then they'll say, oh, we're going to stand, and then they'll stand up, and then we're doing a little weight transferring and stuff, and then they're saying, wow, I stood up today. And they didn't have a lot of, sometimes if I've had people say, okay, we're going to walk next week, and then they'll come into the office and say, oh, I was worried all week thinking about it. Well, if we just took a cast and said, you're coming in for a test socket fitting next week, then they left and said, I didn't know I was going to stand up today, but they left happy. It was good that they didn't have a lot of time to be anxious about it. But yeah, if I can stand them up in the office and that, the weight looks good over the foot and everything's good, I'm just going to take that and finish it at that point, because then I know they can come in at the next appointment and they have a prosthesis that's ready for them to start physical therapy.
Right. So that kind of answers my question, but I mean, we see it so often. I still want to take a second to go on. I mean, how often do you see somebody come in for that very first test socket fitting appointment, and then at the end of the appointment, they kind of look at you and say, wait, I'm not taking this home with me today?
Yeah.
That's a real thing, right? I mean, through this preparatory prosthesis phase, a lot of times while we'll send someone home with that test socket for definitive prosthesis, just, emotionally, physically, all those things, they're probably not ready to use that prosthesis in the uncontrolled environment yet.
No.
With a preparatory prosthesis, right?
No.
So a lot of times when you get that, often we're going to deliver it right to a person, but there's also times where we're going to deliver it to a physical therapist.
I mean, if we deliver it to the person, it's most circumstances, the orders that I'm giving them are only to wear it in physical therapy.
Right.
I mean, they just don't have the experience. They don't know how, they haven't donned it enough times.
Right.
We've given them, orders, we have written instructions, things like that, but they just don't have enough experience using it to where they can use it safely.
Right. And so when they get that preparatory prosthesis, are they just going to put it on and wear it all day long?
I hope not. I say that jokingly, but no. That residual limb is not conditioned for that environment yet. That is a closed cell environment, if they're wearing that with a gel liner,
Mhm.
that means they're going to sweat inside of there. The skin is not ready for that. That suture line is not very seasoned at all to have that kind of moisture in there. Uh, that would not be good. So typically what I like to say, when they go to physical therapy, if we give them instructions only to wear it in physical therapy coming out of the gates,
Right.
that's the 1 hour, 3 times a week. Now,
Right.
we don't want them to do that for very long.
Right.
What the goal is there is just for them to kind of get a couple of sessions underneath their belt. And then we, like the therapist, what we're looking for is 2 hours in the morning, 2 hours in the afternoon.
Right.
Um,
Right.
This
Why
is,
is that?
well, a couple reasons. One of them is we can get them to start wearing it, but they're not wearing it for too long. So that, again, that closed cell environment isn't, doing too much damage to that residual limb. But one of the most important things is they've got to take that off and they can examine their residual limb
Right.
tissue.
Right.
They can look at that tissue and make sure that they don't have any dark, red areas
Right.
where there's getting too much, pressure. And
Mhm.
we're getting them used to examining their own residual limb tissue. If
Right.
they're wearing that for 12 hours a day, they're not taking a look at that limb tissue at all.
Right. And especially though, kind of when it's new, there's not a baseline. Like when somebody first puts on a prosthesis, there's not a baseline for what's right and what's not right.
Right.
So by using it for those wearing schedules, by using short intervals, I just always tell people it helps you keep small problems small
Mm-hmm.
and prevent big problems.
Right.
Because later on, after you're used to using a prosthesis, you're going to know when a small problem starts.
Mm-hmm.
But right off the bat, you're unlikely to know that that small problem is happening
Yeah.
until it's a big problem.
Right.
Now, if you take it off, let things rest, and then put it on, and that same pressure is there, that same feeling is there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now that's a cue to you that, hold on, there's something wrong here. There's something that needs to be fixed. This needs to be corrected before I start to push myself, before I break out of my comfort zone. If you're feeling something, you take it off, you put it back on in the afternoon, that pressure is totally gone.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's just the sock ply management wasn't correct. Maybe
Right.
there's some other factors there. Maybe it was just your limb getting used to it. But when you feel that same thing,
Right.
the second or the third time you put it on, it's a real cue to you that, okay, an adjustment is needed,
Right.
so that I can safely continue to use this.
And understanding that all that fluid after surgery and things like that how an hour at this stage, how sensitive
Right.
that limb is
Right.
to
Right.
pressure and how quickly things can change. And the other thing is taking off and looking at it, because a lot of these people with circulation issues, their sensory feedback, it varies. And some of these people don't have very good sensation. So you'd think, yeah, if the limb is hurting, they would just take it off and look at it, or, cueing to the sensation. Well, maybe they don't have sensation.
Right.
So it's important that they look at it and check.
Right.
So,
Right. And so, I guess the idea here is that we really want to think that the preparatory prosthesis is being designed to accommodate those changes, right?
Mhm.
Like it's
Yes.
specifically made so that as your body changes, we can make changes to it to accommodate your changes and continue to let you use it regularly.
Yes.
So how about, components, knees or feet? How do we pick those? I mean, what's the process for that, for somebody's first prosthesis?
Pretty basic.
Mm-hmm.
We need something that we can get them up and get them going.
Right.
When we are doing the definitive prosthesis, we're trying to custom design something that's going to suit the patient and their lifestyle and what their functional activity.
Mm-hmm.
When we meet people, say they come in the office after they have their surgery, or we meet them in the office, we talk about, what are your goals? What do you want to get back to? When we first do the preparatory prosthesis, we're just trying to get them up,
Right.
getting them to a functional level. Now, at some point, after we get them up on the preparatory prosthesis, we're going to start working towards those goals. We are going to use, and we're going to be able to look at during the preparatory prosthesis period, okay, now they will be working on these, and I can see them going back to work.
Right.
So the design of the definitive prosthesis, it's realistic to think that, okay, they will be able to go back to work, and maybe they will need a foot where they're going to be able to walk outside, because now we can see those goals becoming real.
Right.
But they need something basic to start.
Right.
So it's important to note that if we give them something that's very dynamic, like with a K3 level foot
Mm-hmm.
in the preparatory prosthesis, we can't bill them another one
Sure.
with the definitive
Right.
prosthesis.
So they can't get one that's more tailored to their needs necessarily.
Later on down the line, because we picked the
Right.
wrong foot. So
Right.
like giving something that'll help them start to work towards accomplishing them goals gives us the freedom to pick something that might be better suited to them once we actually see
Right.
how they're functioning later down the line.
And it's like this. I mean, to me, I would think that like kind of on day one, most people's in very day one challenges are going to be very consistent, right? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
so maybe you're 2 years in, you have one person that needs this level of stuff and another person that needs this level of stuff, and their lives look completely different. But on day one, the first time that they stand up for that first 3 to 6 months, those needs are pretty similar.
Yeah.
They're really going to have a lot of overlap. So by keeping the components more basic, we're directly meeting your needs today. The things that you need without extra bells and whistles and complexity that may kind of throw you off or may kind of steer you in the wrong direction or help you or cause you to develop bad habits. We're picking things that are going to function in a way that you can start to learn and also set the stage for later on what things are going to be and what your needs will be.
And like I said, and again, not to bog you down with insurance when you get to designing the definitive prosthesis later. So
right. So with that said, I mean, we know that they're going to be it's going to be designed pretty basic. It's going to be designed fairly standard and fairly fast. So how important is communication through the process of using a test socket? And I mean, that means communication, patient and prosthetist and physical therapist and patient, all those things. How important is that communication and what should that look like when things are going well?
I mean, I think this with the physical therapist and the doctor, this is probably where communication is the most important.
I agree.
I mean, because when we get to the point where they're with the definitive in the later parts, the patient has more control over what's going on. Then this is the point where we're educating them. Right. This is where they don't have as much control and they need consistent information from all of us, because we talked about them being overwhelmed and stuff. So if we're all speaking the same language, then they feel comfortable.
Right.
And if we're not on the same page, then that can be very daunting to them. But if you have a physical therapist and they're going to see things with alignment and stuff like that we might not see while they're in the office, or so us sharing information with each other is just going to help us address the issues that are going to get the patient on track.
Like likely in that physical therapy, especially initially, you're going to be challenged with things that are outside of your everyday life.
Yes.
Right? That's the controlled environment that you're going to get challenged with things. So that physical therapist has eyes on things that you're not doing, that you may not notice to be able to relate in your day-to-day stuff because you're protecting yourself still.
Right.
They're putting you out there and then they can see, hey, it's working good when they're walking like this, but when they try to go upstairs, they're having this problem, or on a slope, their knee is buckling, or these things.
They've got them walking with a cane.
They got them walk for the first time ever.
And they're saying, and so this is the first time, and they can see how the weight's shifting. So we can make alignment changes to help steady. We're seeing them in the office with a walker, but they're actually able to do it, with a cane, and that's important information.
Right. So I mean, we really just think about this as kind of like the first step in reestablishing your goals in your recovery, right? The preparatory prosthesis. How does that play in emotionally? Like what are the thoughts and feelings that are occurring during this process? We already talked about frustration, and we know that's probably the one common thread through this whole process, right? Realistically.
Yeah. You mean during like the initial steps?
Yeah.
I mean, so when we first stand up, it's hard to tell what that first time standing on a prosthesis is going to be like. I mean, we're bearing weight on a part of our body that wasn't designed to bear weight. And a lot of times too, people around us will be telling us, "Oh, you're doing great," because they're seeing us walk. We haven't walked yet. And we're a little overwhelmed because it's hard to tell with this sensory feedback. We're getting a lot of information that's hard to process. Like I said, our bodies weren't designed to respond to what we're feeling. Again, reassuring them that what we're feeling and that the sensation, we're going to rely on those sensations for balance later.
Sure.
It's a little overwhelming at the time. The more you feel that, and again, you're going to get used to that over time. We try to prepare them for that. you know, in the months or the time leading up to the preparatory prosthesis. Again, you know, reassuring them that this is a process
Yep.
and you're going to get used to that. I think we do pretty good with that. But again, just like I said, trying to prepare them for that. And then again, the inconsistencies. I think
Right.
that's, you know, that in
Right.
conjunction with those.
Right.
And then of course, there's some feeling of success. I mean, what I try, you realize if you can prepare them for that and then reassure them that this should be a time to feel good.
Sure.
Like I say to them, like you could tell that's going on, but say, when's the last time you walked?
Right.
It's been like 3 months. And
Sure.
then they're like, wow, you're
Right.
right. I haven't
Yep.
taken steps in 3 months. Like you should feel good about yourself
Sure.
today.
Right.
When's the last time and like, that is true. Like we did better today than we've done.
Right.
As human beings, we need to see ourselves making progress.
Right.
That's why we're working hard. That's what this is all about.
Right. So that brings me up to like, so let's fast forward a little bit to like maybe 10, 12 weeks into this process.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I'll use an analogy. For one, this analogy is kind of funny to me because one, I've never ran a marathon, and two, I don't use a prosthesis. But I've
You ran a half marathon.
Well, sure, but but the half marathon is 13 miles, and it's going to be a really important distinction in my analogy because I've heard over and over again that, you know, during this marathon run, there's this mile 16 wall that
Mhm.
people talk about.
Mhm.
And I mean, because number one, you're physically exhausted from just running 16 miles.
Mhm.
And then number two, you still have 10 miles to go.
Mhm.
So you're not close enough to your goal to start
Mhm.
thinking about like, oh, I'm almost there.
Mhm.
But you still have 16 miles behind you.
Right.
But in that, like, there's this wall, there's this mental hurdle
Mhm.
at this point that you have to push through, that after you kind of get there, then you can start to think, well, now I have 9 miles. Now I have 8 miles. So what would your advice to be to somebody that's at this, you know, kind of at that phase of 10 to 12 weeks into this where they're feeling like, you know, yeah, I've got this progress, but there's too much in front of me still. I can't start thinking about the finish line yet. How do I keep going?
So there was a time when I was in physical therapy and I was having one of my days. And my physical therapist's name was Al.
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, looked at me, he's like, what's with you? And I remember he would kind of, you know, I had physical therapy 3 days a week. So it was, and some of my frustrating, so sometimes when I was having a bad attitude, he would catch it,
Sure.
you know, more
Right.
than most people,
Right.
because people would say, oh, you're so upbeat.
Right,
blah,
right,
blah,
right,
blah,
right.
blah. But, you know, it was frustrating. And
Uh-huh.
a lot of times I'd like to go home and work on things because sometimes when you're getting cued on things, it was frustrating dealing with it in front of other
Mhm.
people. And I said to him, I said, I don't know, I feel like this is a waste of time and I'm not getting anywhere. And he said, do you remember what you said to me the first day I met you? And I said, didn't really know where he was going. I said, no, what? And he said, you asked me if you'd ever walk again. And of course I'd been walking, but I was
Sure.
frustrated because I wasn't walking
Right.
with a cane.
Right.
You know,
Yeah, you're in your mid-20s. You're not doing the things
Right,
that people in their mid-20s do, right? I mean,
here,
it's just
here I was in physical therapy
Uh-huh.
and walking with a cane and blah, 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 blah. So later on that night, when you know, I was thinking about it and I knew what his point was. Like, yeah, I was walking, but it was at that point I realized I was frustrated because I didn't, I saw myself, I wanted to see myself where I was prior to me losing my leg.
Mhm.
And I was still a ways away from that. But I had to realize that I did have some accomplishments along the way. So I said, it's like if you were climbing a mountain, you had to, like, if you had a flag, like every, you know,
Right.
10 yards or,
Right.
you know, 50 yards, you've got to set small goals along the
Right.
way.
Right.
Because if you don't realize the accomplishments that you make when you have a long journey like that, you're going to
Right.
get frustrated.
Right.
And I think, I
Yep.
don't know if that answers your question.
No, I think so. And I mean, it's the idea of, you know, of course you're going to be frustrated in the moment. Of
Mhm.
course, those frustrations are still going to come up, but you got to find a way to take a step back
Right.
and really look at the situation from the outside and consider those steps along the way. I mean, it is because it's such a long process, because there's because the timeline to get to where you want to be is so long that you have to put this thing in. And then,
I mean,
I don't want to tell people what they have to do, but it's also important that when those other people tell you, wow, last time I saw you, you were doing this and now you're doing this. I mean, of course, there's going to be that level of frustration. Like, of course I'm doing this. Like, I should be
right.
doing this other thing. But to be able to step back and say, wait, I am like, there is
Right.
some progress here. This
But see,
is happening.
See, if you're 3 months into physical therapy and say you're 50 years old
Yep.
and you're 2 months post-op, so
Hmm.
like before you started the legs, so say you're 5 months
Right.
after surgery,
Right.
but you've seen for 50 years, you saw yourself as somebody with 2 legs. So
Right.
that 5 months is such a short period
Right.
of time.
Right.
We see ourselves as one way,
Yes.
not as
Right.
that's such a small blip into what our new life is, if that makes sense.
Right.
But
Right.
yeah, we have to remind ourselves that this is a different journey that we're on now,
Right.
and again reward that it's okay to say, hey, we're making it, we're gonna get there. It's
Right.
just we doubt, we
Right.
we, we can't help but doubt until we make it, I
Well,
guess.
and then I think the idea is to accept those frustrations, accept those bad days, right? I mean, that's an important part of the process too, I would think, is to,
Mhm.
when you're frustrated, be frustrated. When
Right.
you're feeling emotions, when you're feeling things, let yourself go through that process so that you're not just internalizing those things so much. And I mean, not to get too much into, psychology and those things, but that's an important part of this whole thing is to, on that day that's a bad day,
Yeah.
say, swear, say this is a bad day. Do those things. Admit this is a bad day. Bad days happen.
Yeah.
Bad days are a part of everything.
Yeah.
But then can you, after you've had that realization that this is a bad day, it can kind of help you sit back and say, well, if this is a bad day, that means yesterday wasn't like this.
Yeah.
That means tomorrow's probably not going to be like this. There's something about how things are happening right now in this moment that's different than my overall experience
Right.
through this. And to accept a bad day is part of life.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, and we can't have good days if we don't have bad days.
Well, I mean, you're going through something. As long as you don't let it consume you,
Right.
that's part of the journey.
Right.
Um,
Right.
we do these step up programs, and we always talk about the peer mentoring, the value of the peer mentoring.
Right.
And what I love that we see happening is we always have these seasoned amputees, and when we have these people who are early in their journey, like they're maybe their first year into it or 6 months into it. I love when they hear the other people talking about when I was 6 months, and you can see, or they're asking questions, and when they validate what they're going through and they see those frustrations
Right.
and they normalize that experience,
Yes.
and they can look to them and go, then that means I'm going to make it through this.
Right.
It gives them
Right.
that ray of hope.
Right. It's like, oh,
This
this person that I'm kind of putting on a pedestal and thinking, well, they've just got it all figured out.
Right.
They didn't just start that way. They
Yes.
went through this same process that I did and yet still figured it out.
Yes.
Right.
I mean,
Yep.
if we could put that in a can
Right.
and give that to these
Right,
people,
right, yeah.
that's invaluable.
Right. Take 2 of these.
Yeah.
Call me in the morning.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what about some common questions that you hear about a preparatory prosthesis? Like, so you tell this person that they're going to get this. I mean, something I hear often is like, will it look real?
Yeah, I hear that.
Right? Do we hear that? And so what's the answer to that? Well, is it going to look real?
No.
Nope. And I mean, there's some specific reasons for that,
Well,
right?
it's made to be adjustable.
Yep.
It's made to be adjustable. It's made, so that we can adjust the socket. It's made so that we can adjust the alignment. Again,
Right.
you're going to change.
Right. The other thing about that too, that I think is important to note is, have you ever had a person tell you that their prosthesis is too light?
No.
So making it look real, putting a cover on it increases that weight.
Mhm.
So, and especially as somebody's kind of adapting to learning to use that prosthesis, making it as lightweight and adjustable are, kind of go hand in hand, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
Common question when give somebody a preparatory prosthesis: how long before I get my definitive?
How long am I going to be using this? That was the next one I was going to say. So, yep. And so how long
Before they even get their preparatory, they
Yep,
ask.
right. Yep. So, I mean, what's that? How long is that? I usually tell people about 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months is, but
it's a rule of thumb, right?
It's also important. It varies per individual.
Yes, it does.
I mean,
it does.
We talked earlier, there was this thing about, selecting components for the definitive prosthetic limb and using more entry-level components. If it gets to a point where people are limited by the components in their preparatory prosthesis,
Right.
we'll start the definitive prosthetic limb earlier.
Right.
I mean, if you're advancing that quickly,
Right.
and we talked about that
Right.
test socket fitting process,
Yep.
then we'll start that.
Yep.
If you're coming along and you need those dynamic that dynamic foot, whatever, then great. Then here we go.
Right. And then again, the other things that we're kind of looking for is, one, is the preparatory prosthesis just not working for you? Whether it is those components and those things, is it the socket fit? I mean, has your body changed so much that we just can't make more adjustments to accommodate this?
I mean,
and
sometimes
make it work,
people
right?
shrink out of those really fast.
And so, but then also sometimes people their condition just stays stable at that beginning.
Yep.
We don't really know when the condition is going to change, do
No.
we? It's so, while we say 3 to 6 months, it's really a rule of thumb. If your preparatory prosthesis is working for you for a year, you're likely to use it for a year.
Mm-hmm.
There's no reason to rush through that process just to get something that, if your preparatory prosthesis is working for you for a year and you go to get a definitive prosthesis, it's probably going to be just like your preparatory prosthesis, isn't it? What changes do you need? If it's still functioning for you, if it's still working, your definitive prosthesis is just going to be the same thing as your prep. So why would you go through that process?
I think we'll repeat this over and over again when it comes to prosthetics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people always ask about a timeline, but if it doesn't fall within a certain set of what the average is, that doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong.
Correct. Exactly.
It can vary per.
Yep.
And it goes the same with the preparatory prosthesis.
Right. How about, does my insurance cover this? You're just talking about, you're going to give me one for 3 months and then you're going to be able to give me another one. Is my insurance going to pay for this?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a real simple answer.
Yes.
It's a very simple answer.
If you have prosthetic coverage.
As long as you have prosthetic coverage. Now, what we can't control is co-pays, deductibles. What is your out-of-pocket cost for these? Different insurances. Unfortunately, in the day and age that we live in, different coverages are going to mean different things, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But the ultimate thing to know is, I've never seen a prosthetics coverage plan, here in Michigan at least, that doesn't cover a preparatory and a definitive prosthesis. Have you ever seen one?
No.
That doesn't cover it?
If you have prosthetics coverage, you're covered.
Yep. Anything else you want to say about the preparatory prosthesis?
I don't believe so.
So what we really wanted to have the take home be for today is that, the preparatory prosthesis is a vital step in healing. Is something else?
I do. Yeah, actually, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're good.
If you do have a preparatory prosthesis and you move on to the definitive prosthesis, and it's something that you could still utilize maybe as a backup, and you needed a leg for maybe the shower or something, that is your prosthesis.
Right. Yep.
So you can hang. You don't
can
have
to be simply converted.
Yeah, if
into
it's
something that can be used as like a spare.
Yeah.
Or some. I have some people that like to. If maybe they figure out. They like the way that their definitive prosthesis stays on better, but it's simpler to put on their preparatory prosthesis. So if they have to get out of bed in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, they slip their preparatory prosthesis on, do that. And then that way it's a faster process for them.
Or if a foot breaks or something like that and you needed a backup, it's just nice to have around. I always tell people, people don't like to have 4 or 5 legs around, so they might donate them back or, but it's always good to have one thing, in case something was to go wrong. So I just thought I'd mention that.
Yep.
Sorry.
No, that's great. I think that's a great point. Thanks for that. So I guess going back to recapping, even though we see kind of more and more, there's a lot of prosthetics providers that may be undervaluing the process of a preparatory prosthesis or trying to skip ahead of, skip it. It's still inherent that it's a vital step in healing, rebuilding strength, and regaining independence. And that ultimately your best course of rehabilitation is going to involve that preparatory prosthesis. So the call to action is to ask questions, be involved in your care. Remember, your journey is unique. Your voice matters. So for any questions, check us out on www.bremerprosthetics.com, Facebook, YouTube, all the regular channels. Ask questions. We'd be happy to get back to you. And stay tuned for our next episode, which is going to be talking about the definitive prosthesis.